situated, I want to introduce the topic for today. So the topic, I've done a lot of master classes on unloading pain, unloading stress, especially to the nervous system, and getting that gap between your pain and your recovery so that you can actually start to move forward. Last week and then today also, I'm talking about moving forward. I'm talking about what are the things that we need to start getting in place so that we can move forward and move forward quickly. And I'll tell you why that's important in a minute, but we want to move forward quickly. If you don't move forward quickly, you're not going to move forward. So we need some tools to help us to gain ground quickly once we have that opportunity. And so today is 3 powerful ways to recover strength quickly. Okay, 3 powerful ways to recover strength quickly. And how does this relate to pain? How does this relate to performance? We all have these views, and I'm going to probably shake up a couple of them for you today. But there's a lot that are really kind of standard. So if you guys, so you've already hit the ready button for me. Thanks, Ben. We're going to go ahead and dive into this. And again, I'm excited about this masterclass because we are going to be getting into some high level stuff. And that doesn't mean it's stuff that's like out there or not in the reach of folks who just want to be able to stand up and sit down comfortably. What it means is we're taking a different view, but we're taking a view that's very grounded in research evidence, in sound scientific principles, and in 32 years of experience helping people try to achieve these goals. So there's a few things we're going to learn today, and I'm going to go ahead and list them for you. Just for folks who like to take notes and want to keep things organized, I'm going to go ahead and list for you what we're going to cover, and then we're going to go and we're going to start diving into those things. So the first thing that we're going to learn today is why strength recovery is actually not just valuable, but vital to a complete recovery. Okay, so I want to say that again. Strength recovery is vital to a complete recovery. You cannot have a complete recovery without strength recovery. We'll get into that. So the second thing is how strength gets lost during pain or injury. It happens, and if you've been hurt, you know it, especially if you've tried to do something. The first thing we notice is the pain, but the second thing you'll notice is the loss of capacity. And so we want to talk about a little bit about how that happens because it helps us to navigate the path forward. All right, the third thing we're going to learn is, and I said 3 powerful ways, 3 powerful methods, but we're going to learn the number 1 method to regain your strength. So if you're listening today or in the future and you saw that title and you thought that was cool and you hopped in, it gets more cool than that because we're going to learn the number 1 method to regain your strength. Okay. And then the fourth thing is why your goal with strength recovery is to be better than before rather than to just get it back. And that might sound incredibly daunting if you're hurting really bad right now, but I don't want you to turn the off button or the off switch on your brain just yet, because I'm going to explain how this works. And as you listen, I think you're going to see there's a process, there's a purpose, there's steps that you can take, and everybody is at their place along this path. And I'm going to try and meet you, every single one of you, where you're at right now along this path in some way, shape, or form during this masterclass today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and launch into some of these learning topics today. So the first thing I said is why strength recovery is vital, not just important, but vital to a complete recovery. Okay, so strength, when we talk about strength, people tend to think of some normal things. And so what I'd like is if you're listening, when I say the word strength, tell me like what comes to mind. I want you to drop in the comments the first thing that comes to your mind when I say strength. There's some pretty common things that pop into people's brains when you say the word strength. And so I think it's important. Again, now this doesn't matter if you're listening right now live. Absolutely, I want you participating. Okay. Or if you're listening in the future and this feels silly to participate, it's not, because this is a conversation. If it's not a conversation, then there's really no purpose to go on. So tell me what you think of when you think of the word strength. Hey, Becky's here. Becky, good morning. Hey, Becky, do me a favor. Keep typing and tell me when I say the word strength, tell me the first thing that pops in your mind. All right, because there's some common things that'll pop into people's brains when we talk about strength. Now, and there's no wrong answers. Should I say that? There's no wrong answers. But what I'm going to do today is I am most likely going to reset your view of strength a little bit. I'm going to end up resetting your view of strength and what strength means and how strength comes about. And that part is, to me, essential, because if I can't do that with you and for you, then you're going to be stuck with some methods that don't fully embrace this. There's a, the concept of strength, like we got definitions of all different kinds of strength when we talk about strength. And when we're looking to move forward, we need to have like a bigger view. Thanks, Becky. Yeah, all over body feeling. Okay, so talking about like your whole body being involved. Absolutely. So we are one big organism that's interacting with this world, and gravity is the number one force we deal with all the time, and internal forces resist that, and then we have all this other stuff to deal with. So strength is not just lifting a weight. Okay, strength is actually something that we coordinate. Okay, so please pay attention to that. Strength is something we coordinate. All right, and so if you want to get like a simple definition of what we're talking about when we're talking about strength today, we're going to be talking about the skill of coordinating movement with a purpose. Okay, the skill of coordinating movement with purpose. So if you follow me on that, let's keep the conversation going. Type the word purpose if you follow me on that, okay? So strength is the skill of coordinating movement with purpose. And so if you're thinking of like somebody's thinking about just grabbing a weight and like pushing up as much weight as you can, so there's a skill to coordinate to execute that movement, and with the purpose of pushing the weight overhead. There's a skill of me reaching down to pick up my bag off the floor, okay? So strength is the skill of coordinating movement with purpose. So just starting right there, I think that most people hopefully can grab a little bit from that, and we can just stop there, and you could take that and start to apply that in different areas. I think you'll see some really cool stuff happen. So if you're taking notes, that's a good one to take. Now, how does this happen? So how do we coordinate these skills? And the simple answer is through patterns. Okay, so through patterns. And what I mean is your brain, this wonderful organ in your head that actually has thinking parts all through your body, but the brain is taking in information all the time from your external world and from your internal world. And ultimately your brain decides how these muscles are going to be recruited, the level, the direction, the force, etc. Your brain is deciding how that happens. And it does that through what we've identified as patterns, which means that when I want to do something with my arm, I have to stabilize internally, my foot has to plant, my torso has to engage, my trapezius has to stabilize. Like there's muscles that have to stabilize the joint structure, there's muscles that coordinate the movement right at the joint, and there's big muscles that actually move the joint. So if you can hear that and understand the level of skill that's involved, even in just a simple movement, I think you can, we'll have another layer of respect and inspiration, because even if you're having pain, there's some amazing, miraculous things that your body's doing to help you continue to deal with the world around you and everything that's going on for you. So when we talk about these patterns, I like to make it really simple and say that we can either have a healthy pattern that moves our joints in a way that limits the amount of stress or inflammation, or we can have a pain-based pattern. And a pain-based pattern tends to be built around pain and compensating for that pain, and then the weakness that results, and leading to other problems that tend to accumulate and cause problems over time. So recovering strength is, in essence, changing your mind, okay? So recovering strength is, in essence, changing your mind. Remember, we said the skill of coordinating movement with purpose, and behind this skill is, well, are your thoughts, okay? And how you're approaching things. So recovering strength is, in essence, changing your mind. So if you're following me on this whole concept of that strength is the skill of coordinating movement with purpose, please type the word skill in there. Let me know that you're getting that. If I'm going too deep, don't worry. I'm going to wrap things all together in a nice little bow for you later, hopefully. So the second thing we talked about was how strength gets lost during pain or injury. Okay, so remember I said your brain is sensing things all the time. And the first thing your brain is tuning into is threat or no threat. Threat or no threat. Now that sense of threat or no threat can be external, right? So if we sense threat, it can trigger a fight or flight response. It can also become, there can be an overwhelm and a shutdown response to a threat. There's also internal, right? So there's internal sensing of threat. So that's the one we're talking about when we're talking about pain or injury, right? We're talking about this internal sense of threat. And then later, if you've ever tried to move past pain, you can understand, great, Becky, you got skill, right? We're talking about skills. If you're trying to move past pain, you may have, and most people have, so don't feel odd or weird or different if you've run into this. Most people run into two problems when they're trying to move past pain. One is more pain, okay? So they try to move forward in the ways that they had in the past, and it doesn't work, okay? It just doesn't work. And then the second one is the apprehension or fear around that future experience of pain. So when we talk about threat, right? Threat can be real or not real, but threat is going to result in a way that your brain deals with and decides to use your muscles. Okay, so internally, when we're talking about internal threat, there's two things that are typical. So when your brain senses tissue damage or threat to an area of your body, especially threat to a neural structure, okay, neural structures are kind of prioritized in this. There's a couple of things that are really typical. So the first one is a protective muscle spasm, okay? And so if we have a protective muscle spasm, how strong can we really be, right? Muscles, the job of muscles is to soak up force and to protect you, right? Muscles soak up first, gravity, soaking up force, protecting your body, and then they produce force and let us do things, right? And so the skill of soaking up force is the primary skill, and then being able to distribute force is another level. Okay, so I said there was two things that when your brain perceives this internal threat that it does. And so one is protective muscle spasm. The other one is, and it can be even more costly, we don't tend to notice it as much when we have pain because we're focused on the pain, but it's this dramatic and sudden loss of strength. So the two things your brain's going to do with an internal threat, protective muscle spasm and dramatic and sudden loss of strength, okay? So let's think about that. If we have a dramatic and sudden loss of strength and we have this protective muscle spasm, and we talk about that the brain is recruiting muscles based on patterns. So what's the result? All right, the result is going to be that this weaker, dysfunctional pattern is going to start to gain precedence. What I mean by that is your brain likes to be efficient. So once it learns a pattern, it likes to keep that pattern forever as an option. But once it uses a pattern over and over, it wants to always use that pattern. Okay, and so patterns are trained. There's two things that train patterns in the body. All right, if you're taking notes, this is a big one. Two things that train patterns in the body. One of them is intensity. And if you have pain, you've experienced intensity, right? The other is repetition. So when we talk about this threat to the nervous system, it can really alter the way you move and your ability to even access the strength that's already in your body, okay? So if you're following me on this idea of threat and how, the internal, external, and how that affects your strength and why the, pain and injury can cause you to lose a dramatic amount of strength, and that can be permanent if we don't do something about it. If you get this, type the word threat, and I'll know you're following me on that. So type the word threat in there, and I'll know you're following on the importance of seeing that how your brain perceives things really does matter. So I said I was going to tell you the number one method to regain strength, and I'm going to tell you that right now. And we've already talked about it. I've hinted at it this whole time. We're coming to this, right? So the number one method to regain your strength is to change your mind about what you're doing. Okay, change your mind about what you're doing. And what I mean by that is, instead of thinking of strength recovery as exercises or a workout or reps and sets or things like that, I want you to think of strength recovery as a skill. Okay, so your number one method to regain your strength long-term is to think about strength recovery as a skill. So if you're trying to learn a skill, if you were trying to learn, say, something like the piano, right? Or for me, I competed in combat sports for a long time. And there's a skill in striking sports. I'm going to do this because it's upper body, right? It's called a jab, right? And I was taught a jab a long time ago. I knew what a jab was when I was like 5 years old. My dad had boxed, and my brother and I, got some gloves, and we used to do some basement and backyard boxing with our friends. So I knew what a jab was. I knew what a punch was. But there came a point I wanted to do it better. I wanted to get better at it. And so I practiced and I practiced and I tuned into the effect of the punch on heavy bags and these Makawara boards and things like that, and punch mitts. And so I kept putting this thing to the test, and then I'd work on it. I try and develop my strength. I try and develop my timing. I try and develop my position. And all the while I was working on this skill, okay? So what's happened over time is this skill of a jab, like I can be in the worst shape I've ever been in. I can be sick as a dog, but I can still jab with a tremendous amount of force, okay? A tremendous amount of power, a tremendous amount of strength, because the skill of that is so ingrained in my system. And so if you follow me on this whole strength as skill, this would be a good time to pop in the skill. Again, I don't care if you're listening now or in the future. Drop it in there. Stay with me. Okay, so the fourth thing I said I'd talk about is why the goal is to be better than before rather than just get it back. This one's going to be quick, folks. This one's going to be quick. So it's because it's very simple. And now this is not all circumstances, but if you follow me a little bit further, you'll see what I'm talking about. So where you were before got you hurt. So where you were before got you hurt. So your body couldn't absorb the force or deal with what you're now. I get like people are listening and they're like, but I got hit by a truck. Are you ever going to absorb that force? No. But preparing your body to handle, to be strong, to be skilled with strength creates a better outcome in almost all cases. So another way of looking at this is, if you have a savings account, anybody ever had a savings account, right? I remember when I was a kid, somebody opened a savings account for me. And I was like, okay, cool, the savings account's there. And I didn't really add to it. I just let it sit. Okay, now it was growing. It was gathering interest, not quickly, but it was gathering interest. And if you've ever done this, then you have likely learned the same thing I learned. If you let a savings account sit, eventually it's going to take a hit. All right, if you let it sit, eventually it's going to take a hit. And what I mean by that is, you're going to get sick and be out of work. There's going to be some type of family emergency and you're going to need to contribute. You may suffer job loss, or there might be a natural disaster. Life is going to happen. And what was sitting there and gaining very, very, very slowly, or maintaining rather stably, is going to take a hit. Okay, your strength and fitness are the same way. Okay, your strength and fitness are the same way. So, when we're talking about that, we always want to be moving forward. Okay, we always want to move forward with our strength and fitness. And so, if that rings true to you, if that sounds like a smart move to you, go ahead and type the word forward in the comments for me. All right. So the whole premise of this masterclass today was that we were going to learn 3 things to regain your strength fast. Okay. And I've brought you here not to try and dupe you or tease you or draw you along. I think that all the things that I just talked about, Ben, yes, forward. I think all the things that I just talked about were really important, so you can understand that these skills that I'm going to talk about were not chosen with haste or with lack of due process. Okay, so I'm going to share 3 things with you, 3 methods that are they're skills that you can learn and develop that will help you move your strength forward faster. Okay, so the first skill you can develop is learning how to pulse muscles. And what I mean by pulse a muscle, so we're upper body here with the video, is if I can learn to turn this muscle on really powerfully, like just sitting here, if I can turn it on really powerfully and relax, I can turn it on really powerfully and relax. So this is a type of isometric, okay? And people are looking at this and saying, yeah, but there's no range of motion, there's no this, there's no that. I'm hearing you, but follow me. If I can learn this skill of turning this muscle on deeply and powerfully, and then suddenly, okay, so normally it takes 6 to 10 seconds to get a muscle to contract to full power. But if I can hold position and contract this, so I'm not doing anything kooky that might actually cause me pain. But if I can turn that muscle on powerfully, and I can learn to do that, and I can systematically go through my body and learn to turn these muscles on powerfully, I'm learning one of the most important skills in strength, and that's recruitment, okay? And I'm learning the skill of recruitment because I'm isolating different muscles, not by grabbing some machine or putting my arm up against a brace or anything like that, but with my mind. I'm tuning in, I'm feeling that muscle, I'm feeling the whole of that muscle, and then I'm trying to find a deeper and deeper and deeper connection to that muscle. So skill number 1, pulsing. You can do it with just about any muscle in your body and gain great value, okay? Skill number 2 is a type of isometric. I've heard this called many different things over the years, but I like to call it a supra-max isometric, okay? So a supra-max isometric, and I didn't grab a weight, so we're gonna pretend, okay? I'm gonna pretend that I have a weight. I don't need a big weight, but I do need to have really good position with my body, okay? I need to have my feet set, my legs strong, my hips in a nice neutral position, my chest open, my head up, my eyes forward. Why? Because position matters, okay? And if I were to hold that weight out in front of me, all right, even if it's a small weight, and I were to stand there and hold and breathe and in a sense just meditate, feel my feet digging into the ground, feel my body strong, eventually I'm going to start to get tired, okay? So the first muscles that are working to hold this arm up are probably some lower threshold muscles, and they're going to begin to fatigue. And if I make it really important to keep my arm here, I'm going to start to cycle through and recruit higher and higher threshold muscles. Are you guys catching a trend? When I said pulsing, I said that I wanted to tap into deeper and deeper muscle fibers. I like to call them the Hulk muscles, okay? The Hulk muscles, the Hulk was a superhero who simply was a human who, through manipulation, was able to tap into his potential. So we have this super high potential in our muscles that very few of us ever even get close to tapping into, while supramaximal isometrics give us a chance to progressively tap into those higher and higher threshold muscles. And eventually we're going to start to feel uncomfortable. It's going to burn, right? I'm totally safe here. Okay, so tapping into these muscles at a high level in a safe way, that's a big part of what we're doing. Okay, there's lots of ways you can tap into high threshold muscles, but lots of ways carry a lot of risk. So we're trying to tap into these high threshold muscles with very little risk. Now, as I'm holding, even just standing here right now, I already did a workout today, so I'm actually feeling some burn. Okay, now most of the time people feel burn, they go, huh, and they put it down. No, you continue to hold. And then what's gonna happen eventually is your hand's gonna begin to drop. And the tendency for people is to squirm and do these things. But if you resist that squirming, you're dealing with intensity. Your brain is perceiving threat of falling. It's an artificial threat. It's not a real threat, it's an artificial threat. So it's safe to work with it. And as you hold and as you keep good position, while this hand is slowly dropping, you're doing a supramaximal isometric. Okay, so if you follow me, you can type the word supramax in there, all right? So, and there's a lot of ways to do this through your whole body, okay? But we want to do it in a way that's smart because we move and there's certain movements that matter more than others. And there's patterns of movement that matter more than others. So there's ways to apply this principle to patterns so that we get the most out of it. Okay, and then the last one that I'm going to talk about is simply a catch. Okay, so I could toss a ball up and catch it. Okay, and so like I said, the number one function of your muscles is soaking up force. That's great. I can take that weight, that small weight, and I can let it go. And what's going to happen, right? Gravity is going to take it, 9.8 meters per second squared acceleration, it's going to drop down. Now, if I reach down and catch it suddenly and stop my movement, right when I catch it, that's a lot more force that I have to generate to catch it, okay? The other thing that happens is falling makes your brain think that there's something, a bigger deal to deal with, okay? So that fight or flight, it helps to tap into some hidden potential. So when I reach and catch it and try and suddenly stop it, my brain's actually gonna let me recruit at a higher level, okay? So the concept of this is called an altitude drop, but there's ways, so altitude drops, so just so you understand, if I were to stand up on top of an 18-inch box, step out, and then suddenly drop down to the floor and catch myself in a squat position, if I do that properly, I'm going to be absorbing through my muscles 1,500, 2,500 pounds of force in that moment of catching, okay? So who here squats 1,500 to 2,500 pounds, okay? Nobody. Nobody's squatting that. But your body can generate that level of force to protect you, and it'll do it. Now, stepping off an 18-inch box and landing probably isn't the best way to start for most of you. But standing still and just dropping into a partial crouch, right? Most people can manage that. Now, if you can't, it might not be the proper choice at the time, right? These are skills. And the skill of catching is a huge one for people and for movement.